Jake Miller woke up at 5 in the morning just like every other day for the past 3 years. The alarm on his small bedside table made a soft beep. He turned it off quickly and sat up on his narrow bed. His room was tiny, like all the crew. Quarters on Deep Space Station Alpha 7. Just enough space for a bed, a small desk, and a closet. He put on his white chef uniform and black boots. The uniform was clean and pressed. Jake always kept his things neat and tidy. Old habits from his time in the army, he thought to himself, but that was a long time ago. Now he was just a cook. Jake walked through the quiet halls of the station. Most people were still sleeping. The lights were dimmed for night shift. His footsteps echoed softly on the metal floors. He liked this time of day. It was peaceful. No noise, no crowds, no problems. The kitchen was huge. It had to be big to feed 15,000 people every day. Rows of ovens, giant pots, and endless counter space filled the room. Jake flipped on the lights and the kitchen came to life. The hum of refrigerators and the soft whoosh of air vents filled the space. Pete Santos was already there, chopping vegetables. Pete was his best friend and sous chef, a short, round man with dark hair and a big smile. He had been working with Jake for 2 years. "Morning, boss," Pete said without looking up from his cutting board. "Early as always." "Morning, Pete. How's it looking today?" Jake asked. He walked to his office, a small glass room in the corner of the kitchen. Papers covered his desk. Food orders, staff schedules, supply lists. The boring but important work of feeding a space station. "Got a big delivery coming in at noon," Pete called out. "New supplies from Earth, and the Zephyrian delegates want their special meals again." Jake nodded. The Zephyrians were aliens. They looked like tall, thin humans, but with blue-gray skin and large black eyes. They had been on the station for 2 months now. "Peace talks," Commander Hayes had said. Very important for human and alien relations. Jake had cooked for the Zephyrian delegation many times. They were picky eaters. They only wanted certain foods prepared in specific ways. No salt, no spices. Everything had to be bland and soft. It was strange, but Jake did what they asked. His job was to cook, not to ask questions. By 6 o'clock, the kitchen was full of activity. 20 cooks and kitchen staff worked to prepare breakfast for the station. The smell of coffee, eggs, and fresh bread filled the air. Jake moved between the cooking stations, checking on everything. He tasted the soup, adjusted the seasoning on the vegetables, and made sure the bread was not burned. "Chef Miller," a young woman called out. It was Amy Foster, one of the engineering techs. She was small and thin with red hair tied back in a ponytail. She often came to the kitchen early to grab coffee before her shift. "Morning, Amy." "The usual?" Jake asked. "Yes, please. Black coffee and a muffin." She looked tired. Dark circles under her eyes. Jake poured her coffee and handed her a blueberry muffin. "You okay? You look like you didn't sleep much." Amy shrugged. "Been working late. Strange things happening with the station systems, power fluctuations, communication glitches. Probably nothing, but it keeps me busy." Jake filed that information away in his mind. He was good at remembering details, small things that other people might forget. It was a habit from his army days. Always watch, always listen, always remember. The breakfast rush began at 7. Lines of people filled the cafeteria, scientists in lab coats, security officers in blue uniforms, maintenance workers in coveralls, and civilian families with children. Jake watched from the kitchen as his staff served the food. Everything moved smoothly, like a well-oiled machine. Commander Lisa Hayes came through the line at 8:30. She was a tall woman with short blonde hair and sharp blue eyes. She always looked tired these days. The stress of running the station was wearing on her. "Good morning, Commander," Jake said as he personally served her breakfast. "How are things today?" "Could be better, Jake. Could be better." She took her tray and found a table in the corner where she could eat alone and read reports on her tablet. Around 10 o'clock, Jake noticed something odd. One of the Zephyrian delegates came to the kitchen. His name was Vector, and he was the food coordinator for the alien group. He was taller than most humans, with the typical blue-gray skin of his people. "Chef Miller," Vector said in his careful English, "I must change our food order for today." "What kind of change?" Jake asked. "We will need different foods, more protein, meat dishes, and we will need larger portions." Jake frowned. This was strange. For 2 months, the Zephyrians had eaten the same bland, simple foods. Now they wanted meat and bigger portions? I can do that, Jake said. But may I ask why the change? Vectar's black eyes looked away. Our dietary needs have changed. Please prepare the food as requested. Jake nodded, but something felt wrong. In his experience, people didn't just change their eating habits overnight, especially not aliens, who had been very specific about their food requirements. The lunch service went normally, except for the Zephyrian meals. Jake personally prepared their food, extra portions of roasted chicken, beef stew, and protein bars. When Vectar came to collect the meals, Jake watched him carefully. The alien seemed nervous. His hands shook slightly as he carried the trays. After lunch, Jake decided to take a walk around the station. He often did this during quiet periods. It helped him think, and he liked to see how the station operated. He walked through the science labs where researchers worked on experiments he didn't understand. He passed the docking bays, where supply ships came and went. He visited the residential areas where families lived in small apartments. As he walked, Jake noticed things, small details that most people would miss. There were more security patrols than usual. Guards stood at important doors and checkpoints. Their faces were tense. Something was making them nervous. In the communications center, Jake saw Dr. Allen, cross-talking in whispers with 2 other scientists. Dr. Cross was the chief science officer, a thin man with gray hair and thick glasses. He looked worried. When he saw Jake, he stopped talking and walked away quickly. Jake continued his walk, but his mind was working. The power problems Amy mentioned, the nervous security guards, Dr. Cross acting strange, and the Zephyrians changing their food orders. Individually, these things might mean nothing. Together, they painted a picture Jake didn't like. He returned to the kitchen and found Pete cleaning the ovens. Pete, I need to ask you something, Jake said quietly. Have you noticed anything strange lately? Anything different about the station? Pete stopped cleaning and looked at his friend. Now that you mention it, yeah. The supply orders have been weird. We're getting more food than usual, but some items are late or missing. And yesterday, I saw some guys moving boxes through the service tunnels. Boxes I didn't recognize. Jake felt a cold feeling in his stomach. Service tunnels were used for maintenance and supplies. They ran throughout the station, connecting every section. If someone wanted to move things secretly, the tunnels would be the perfect place. What kind of boxes? Jake asked. Metal cases, heavy ones. Took 4 guys to carry each box. They weren't wearing station uniforms either. I thought it was strange, but I didn't say anything. Jake thanked Pete and went to his office. He sat at his desk and tried to make sense of what he was learning. Strange boxes in the service tunnels. Power problems, nervous security, aliens changing their eating habits. None of it made sense individually. But together. At 4 o'clock, the dinner prep began. Jake worked alongside his staff, but his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about the boxes Pete had seen. What was in them? Who was moving them? And why use the service tunnels? As the dinner service started, Jake made a decision. Tonight, after the kitchen closed, he would take a look at those service tunnels himself. He needed to know what was happening on his station, because Deep Space Station Alpha 7 was his home, and these people were his family. If something was wrong, he had to find out what it was. The dinner service ended at 9 o'clock. Jake sent his staff home and stayed behind to finish the cleaning. When the kitchen was empty and quiet, he grabbed a flashlight and headed for the service entrance. The tunnels were dark and narrow, filled with pipes and cables. Jake moved carefully, following the main route toward the docking bays. After 20 minutes of walking, he found what he was looking for, a stack of metal boxes hidden behind a junction of large pipes. Jake opened his flashlight and examined them carefully. The boxes had no markings, but they were heavy and well made. He tried to open one, but it was locked. Jake was about to leave when he heard footsteps in the tunnel. Someone was coming. He quickly turned off his flashlight and hid behind the pipes. 2 figures walked past, carrying another box between them. In the dim light, Jake could see they were wearing dark clothes, not station uniforms. After they passed, Jake followed at a distance. The figures led him deeper into the tunnels to a section he rarely visited. They stopped at a large storage area and placed the box with dozens of others. Jake counted at least 50 boxes, all the same size and shape. One of the figures opened a box and Jake saw his worst fears confirmed. Inside were weapons, military-grade rifles, ammunition, and what looked like explosive devices. Enough weapons to arm a small army. Jake's blood turned cold. Someone was planning an attack on the station. But who? And when? He had to warn Commander Hayes. He had to tell security. But as he turned to leave, his foot knocked against a pipe. The sound echoed through the tunnel. "What was that?" one of the figures called out. Jake ran. He moved as fast as he could through the narrow tunnels, his heart pounding. Behind him, he could hear footsteps and voices. They were chasing him. He reached the kitchen entrance and burst through the door. The familiar sight of his kitchen felt like safety, but Jake knew it was an illusion. Danger was coming to Deep Space Station Alpha 7, and he might be the only one who knew about it. Jake grabbed the communication panel and tried to call Commander Hayes. Static filled the line. He tried security. More static. The communication systems were being jammed. As Jake stood in his dark kitchen holding a dead communication device, he realized the truth. The attack wasn't coming. It was already here. And he, the cook that everyone ignored, might be the station's only hope for survival. Jake stood in the dark kitchen, his hands shaking as he held the dead communication device. The station felt different now. The normal hum of the air systems seemed louder. Every shadow looked dangerous. He had to think fast. The first explosion came at exactly midnight. The lights went out across the entire station. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Alarms started screaming. Jake felt the floor shake under his feet. He ran to the kitchen windows that looked out into the main corridor. People were running everywhere. Some were screaming. Security guards were shouting orders, but their voices were lost in the chaos. Another explosion, closer this time. The windows rattled. Jake could smell smoke in the air. Whatever was happening, it was big and it was planned. Pete burst through the kitchen doors, his face white with fear. "Jake, what's going on? The whole station is going crazy." "It's an attack," Jake said. His voice was calm, but inside he felt sick. "Someone has been planning this for a long time." "An attack? Who would attack us?" Pete asked. Before Jake could answer, the lights came back on, but something was wrong. Instead of the normal white light, everything was tinted blue. And there was a voice coming from the communication system. "Attention, residents of Deep Space Station Alpha 7. This is General Zekthara of the Zephyrian Coalition. Your station is now under our control. Do not resist. Gather in the main cafeteria and await further instructions." Jake felt his stomach drop. The Zephyrians. The aliens who had been living on the station for 2 months. The ones who had changed. Their eating habits yesterday. They weren't here for peace talks. They were here to take over. "The cafeteria," Pete whispered. "They want everyone in our cafeteria." Jake thought quickly. If the Zephyrians wanted everyone in the cafeteria, it was probably a trap. They would have all the humans in one place, easy to control. But Jake knew something the aliens didn't. He knew every inch of this kitchen and the service tunnels connected to it. "Pete, we're not going to the cafeteria," Jake said. "We're going to hide." "Hide? Where?" "The cold storage room. It's behind the main freezer. The aliens won't know about it." Jake led Pete through the kitchen to the large walk-in freezer. Behind a rack of frozen meat was a small door that most people never noticed. It led to an emergency storage room that Jake had discovered months ago. It was cold and cramped, but it was hidden. They had barely closed the door when they heard voices in the kitchen. Alien voices speaking in their own language. Jake pressed his ear to the door and listened. He could hear them searching the kitchen, opening cabinets and checking corners. After what felt like hours, the voices moved away. Jake waited another hour before opening the door. The kitchen was empty, but it had been searched. Pots and pans were scattered on the floor. Food containers were opened and dumped out. "They're being thorough," Jake whispered to Pete. They crept out of the storage room and made their way to the kitchen windows. The corridors were mostly empty now, but Jake could see Zephyrian soldiers standing guard at key points. They wore black armor and carried strange weapons that glowed blue. "What do we do now?" Pete asked. Jake was thinking. In the army, he had learned about urban warfare and resistance tactics. The first rule was to stay hidden and gather information. The second rule was to find other survivors. "We need to find out what happened to the other people," Jake said, "and we need to find a way to fight back." Using the service tunnels, Jake and Pete made their way toward the residential section. The tunnels were dark and quiet, but they provided good cover. Jake had spent 3 years learning every inch of these passages. Now that knowledge might save their lives. They reached a tunnel entrance near the residential area and carefully looked out. What they saw made Jake's blood boil. Zephyrian. Soldiers were going door to door, forcing families out of their homes. Men, women, and children were being herded down the corridors like cattle. Jake saw Amy Foster being pushed along with a group of other people. She looked scared but unharmed. Dr. Cross was there too, along with dozens of other station residents. "Where are they taking them?" Pete whispered. Jake watched the direction the prisoners were being moved. "Looks like the main conference rooms. They're using them as holding areas." They followed the prisoners through the tunnel system, staying parallel to the main corridors. Jake counted at least 200 people being held in different rooms, but that was only a small part of the station's population. Where were the other 14,000 residents? Their question was answered when they reached the central hub of the station. Through a ventilation grate, Jake could see into the main assembly hall. It was packed with people. Thousands of station residents sat on the floor, surrounded by Zephyrian guards. At the front of the hall stood a tall Zephyrian in elaborate armor. This had to be General Zekthara, the one who had spoken on the communication system. He was addressing the crowd. "Your government has refused our demands for territory in the outer systems," the general was saying. "Therefore, we have taken this station as compensation. You will be treated well if you cooperate. Those who resist will be dealt with harshly." Jake watched as Commander Hayes was brought forward. Her hands were tied behind her back, and there was blood on her face, but she held her head high as she faced the alien general. "This is an act of war," she said clearly. "Earth will not negotiate with terrorists." General Zekthara made a gesture, and one of his soldiers raised his weapon. There was a flash of blue light, and Commander Hayes fell to the floor. She didn't get up. The crowd gasped. Some people started crying. Children were screaming. Jake felt rage building in his chest. These aliens had killed a good woman, a woman who had always treated him with respect. "Let this be a lesson," the general announced. "Cooperation will be rewarded. Resistance will be punished." Jake pulled Pete away from the grate. They had seen enough. "They killed her," Pete whispered. "They killed the commander." "I know," Jake said. His voice was hard now. "And they're going to pay for it." They made their way back toward the kitchen area, but Jake took a detour through the security section. He wanted to see if any of the station's defenders were still fighting. What they found was not encouraging. The security office was destroyed. Weapons lockers were blown open and emptied. Bodies of security guards lay in the corridors. The Zephyrians had hit the security forces first and hit them hard. But in a small office near the armory, Jake found something useful. Captain Ron Blake was still alive, but barely. He had been shot in the shoulder and was bleeding badly. "Jake?" Blake whispered when he saw them. "What are you doing here? Everyone's supposed to be in the assembly hall." "We didn't get the memo," Jake said as he examined Blake's wound. "How bad is it?" "I'll live, but most of my men won't. They caught us completely off guard. Had people on the inside. Knew exactly where to hit us." Jake tore strips from his chef's jacket to make bandages. "How many of them are there?" "Maybe 300 soldiers, but they control all the key systems now. Power, communications, life support. They've been planning this for months." "What about Earth? Will they send help?" Blake's face was grim. "The aliens jammed all outgoing communications before they attacked. As far as Earth knows, we're still having peaceful negotiations. No one is coming to help us." Jake finished bandaging Blake's shoulder. "Then we'll have to help ourselves." "We? Jake, you're a cook. This isn't your fight." Jake thought about Commander Hayes lying dead on the floor of the assembly hall. He thought about the families being held prisoner. He thought about the children crying in fear. "It is now," he said. They helped Blake to his feet and brought him back to the kitchen through the service tunnels. Jake's hiding spot behind the freezer was getting crowded, but it was still the safest place on the station. "We need a plan," Jake said once they were settled. "3 of us against 300 trained soldiers." "It's hopeless," Blake said. "We should try to escape, get to the shuttle bay and steal a ship. And leave 15,000 people to die?" Jake shook his head. "No, we fight." "With what? Kitchen knives?" Jake smiled for the first time since the attack began. "You'd be surprised what you can do with kitchen equipment." Over the next few hours, Jake began to form a plan. He knew the station better than anyone. He knew where the aliens would expect resistance and where they wouldn't. He knew which systems were vulnerable and how to cause maximum disruption. But first, they needed more people. 3 men couldn't fight an army, but maybe they could inspire others to fight. Jake sent Pete through the tunnels to scout for other survivors. The young man was scared, but he trusted Jake completely. Within a few hours, Pete returned with good news. "Found a group hiding in the engineering section," he reported. "About 20 people, including some security guards and maintenance workers. They're scared, but they want to fight back." "Anyone I know?" Jake asked. "Amy Foster is with them, and Carlos Rivera from the janitorial staff, remember him? Big guy, used to be a Marine." Jake nodded. Carlos was a good man, quiet and hard-working. If he was a former Marine, he would know how to fight. "Bring them here," Jake said. "But be careful. Use only the service tunnels." While Pete was gone, Jake began gathering supplies. Kitchen knives could be weapons. Cleaning chemicals could make explosives. Hot oil could be a nasty surprise for anyone who tried to break into the kitchen. Blake watched Jake work with growing amazement. "You're actually serious about this?" "Dead serious," Jake replied as he sharpened a large chef's knife. "These aliens think they can come to our home and hurt our people. They think we're weak because we're not soldiers. They're wrong." When Pete returned with the survivors, Jake saw hope in their eyes for the first time. Amy Foster looked tired but determined. Carlos Rivera was a big man with dark skin and intelligent eyes. The security guards were young and scared, but they were ready to follow orders. "Listen up," Jake addressed the group. "The aliens control the main areas of the station, but they don't control everything. They don't know about the service tunnels. They don't know about the secondary systems. And they definitely don't know about the kitchen." He pointed to a map of the station that he had drawn on a whiteboard. "We're going to hit them where they don't expect it. We're going to cause chaos. We're going to make them afraid. And we're going to save our people." Amy raised her hand. "What about the weapons?" "They have military equipment." "We'll make our own," Jake said. "This kitchen has everything we need to wage war. We just have to be creative." Carlos spoke up. "What's the objective? What are we trying to accomplish?" Jake looked at each person in the group. These were ordinary people, cooks, engineers, janitors, guards, not soldiers, but they were all that stood between the Zephyrians and complete victory. "We're going to take back our home," he said simply, "one room at a time." The war for Deep Space Station Alpha 7 was about to begin, and it would be led by a cook who everyone said was just there to serve food. But Jake Miller was about to show the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one you never see coming. Jake divided his small group into teams. Amy Foster would handle the technical work, cutting power lines, jamming communications, and causing system failures. Carlos Rivera would lead the combat teams when they needed to fight directly. Pete would coordinate supply runs and keep everyone fed. The security guards would serve as scouts and messengers. "First target is the power distribution center in Section C," Jake explained, pointing to his hand-drawn map. "It's lightly guarded because the aliens think they control all the main systems. If we can cause rolling blackouts, it will confuse them and give us chances to move around." Amy nodded. "I know that section well. There are maintenance shafts that lead right to the main power controls." "Good. Carlos, I need you to take 2 men and create a distraction near the docking bays. Nothing big, just enough to draw some guards away from Section C." Carlos smiled. "I can do that. What kind of distraction?" Jake handed him a bag of kitchen supplies. "Flour and oil. Mix them right and you get a nice explosion. Not enough to hurt anyone seriously, but loud enough to get attention." The former Marine looked at the bag with respect. "You really do know how to make weapons from cooking supplies." 20 years of cooking teaches you a lot about chemistry," Jake said. "Everything is just ingredients mixed in different ways." They spent the next hour preparing for their first mission. Jake showed them how to move quietly through the service tunnels. He taught them hand signals for silent communication. He even showed them how to use kitchen utensils as tools and weapons. "Remember," Jake said before they left, "we're not trying to win a battle today. We're trying to start a war. Hit fast, hit hard, and disappear. Make them think there are more of us than there really are." The first mission went perfectly. Amy reached the power controls without being detected. Carlos created his distraction, exactly on schedule. When the lights went out in 3 sections of the station, the Zephyrian guards were confused and scared. Jake monitored their communications using a radio he had salvaged from the security office. The aliens were speaking, in their own language, but their tone was clear. They were angry and worried. "Phase 1 complete," Jake told his team when they returned. "Now we wait and watch." Over the next few days, Jake's small resistance grew. Word spread through the service tunnels that someone was fighting back. More survivors found their way to the kitchen hideout. A doctor who had been hiding in the medical bay. A pilot who knew the shuttle systems. Even a few children whose parents had been captured. Each new person brought information. The aliens were holding most of the prisoners in the assembly hall and conference rooms. They had set up command posts in the main security office and the communications center. They were using the docking bays to bring in more supplies and equipment, but they were also getting nervous. Jake's power outages and small explosions were making them jumpy. They were posting more guards and conducting more patrols. They were starting to realize that not everyone on the station had been captured. "Time for Phase 2, Jake announced to his growing group. Now numbering 30 people, they filled the kitchen storage area completely. "What's Phase 2? Asked Dr. Kate, Young, the woman who had joined them from the medical bay. "We start hitting them where it hurts," Jake said. "Their food supply. The Zephyrians had taken over the main cafeteria, but they were still using the large food storage areas to feed their soldiers. Jake knew exactly where these storage areas were and how to reach them through the service tunnels. "We poisoned their food?" Carlos asked. "Nothing deadly," Jake said quickly. "I'm not a murderer, but there are ways to make food very unpleasant to eat, ways to make soldiers sick enough that they can't fight effectively." Jake had learned about biological warfare in the army, but he had never used the knowledge before. Now he was going to put it to work. He sent teams to add certain chemicals to the alien food supplies, not enough to kill, but enough to cause severe stomach problems. Within 2 days, half the Zephyrian soldiers were sick. They were throwing up, had fevers, and couldn't stay at their posts for long periods. The alien medical staff was overwhelmed trying to figure out what was wrong. General Zekathara was furious. Jake could hear it in the intercepted communications. The general was convinced that Earth had somehow sent biological weapons to the station. He never suspected that a cook with basic chemistry knowledge was the cause of his problems. "This is working better than I hoped," Amy reported. She had been monitoring the alien communications. "They're requesting medical supplies from their home world. They're even talking about evacuating some of their sick soldiers." But Jake knew the aliens wouldn't give up easily. Sick soldiers could be replaced. He needed to hit them harder. "Time for Phase 3, he announced. Phase 3 was more dangerous. Instead of just causing problems, Jake planned to start rescuing prisoners. But first, he needed better intelligence about where everyone was being held and how many guards were watching them. He sent his best scouts to map out the prison areas. They reported back that the aliens were holding people in 5 different locations. The main assembly hall had the largest group, about 8,000 people. The conference rooms held smaller groups of prisoners, probably sorted by their jobs and skills. "They're separating the technical people from the general population," Dr. Young observed, "probably planning to use them to run the station systems." "Which means they plan to stay here for a long time," Jake said grimly. That night, Jake made his first rescue attempt. The target was a small group of prisoners being held in Conference Room 7. Only 20 people, but it included several engineers who could help with his technical operations. Jake, Carlos, and 2 security guards made their way through the service tunnels to a position directly above the conference room. Using tools from the kitchen, they carefully cut through the ceiling tiles. The room below held exactly 20 prisoners, just as the scouts had reported. But there were 4 Zephyrian guards, not 2 as expected. Jake would have to change his plan. He dropped down into the room silently, landing behind one of the guards. Before the alien could react, Jake pressed a kitchen knife to his throat. "Tell your friends to put down their weapons," Jake whispered. "Make any loud noise and you die." The guard said something in the Zephyrian language. The other 3 guards turned around and saw Jake holding their companion. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Carlos dropped through the ceiling behind another guard. The former Marine was bigger and stronger than the alien. He grabbed the guard's weapon and pointed it at the other 2. "Drop them," Carlos said simply. The remaining guards looked at each other, then slowly placed their weapons on the floor. The prisoners, who had been watching in amazement, started to stand up. "Stay quiet," Jake told them. "We're getting you out of here, but we have to move fast." Using rope made from kitchen towels, Jake's team helped the prisoners climb up through the ceiling into the service tunnels. It took 20 minutes to get everyone out safely. Among the rescued prisoners was Ben Parker, a senior engineer who knew the station's systems almost as well as Jake knew the kitchen. "Jake Miller?" Ben said in amazement as they made their way through the tunnels. "What are you doing here? How did you organize a rescue?" "Long story," Jake replied. "Right now, we need to get you all to safety." The successful rescue boosted morale enormously. For the first time since the attack, people began to believe that they might actually have a chance. But Jake knew the aliens would respond quickly. Sure enough, within an hour of the rescue, General Zekthara's voice came over the communication system. "Attention, human rebels. You have taken something that belongs to us. Return our prisoners immediately, or we will begin executing the hostages in the assembly hall. You have 2 hours to comply." Jake felt sick. He had saved 20 people, but now he had put 8,000 others in danger. "What do we do?" Pete asked. "We can't let them kill all those people." Jake was thinking hard. The general was calling. His bluff. But Jake had expected this. In fact, he had been counting on it. "We give them what they want," he said finally. "What?" Carlos looked shocked. "We're going to surrender?" "No," Jake smiled grimly. "We're going to trade, but not the way they expect." Jake's plan was risky, but it was their only choice. He sent a message to General Zekthara through the communication system. "General, this is Jake Miller. I'm the leader of the human resistance. I'm willing to trade myself for the safety of the prisoners in the assembly hall." There was a long pause before the general responded. "Jake Miller, so you are the one causing us so much trouble. Very well. Present yourself at the main security office in 1 hour. Come alone and unarmed." "How do we know you won't hurt the prisoners?" "Anyway," Jake asked. "You have my word as a military officer." Jake almost laughed. The word of a military officer who had murdered Commander Hayes and invaded a peaceful station. But he needed to buy time. "I'll be there in 1 hour," Jake said. Of course, Jake had no intention of surrendering, but he needed the aliens to think. He was going to. While they prepared for his arrival, Jake would be preparing something very different. "Ben," Jake said to the rescued engineer, "I need you to help Amy with something. Can you access the station's environmental controls from the maintenance tunnels?" "Probably." "What do you have in mind?" Jake explained his plan. It was crazy and dangerous, but it might work. "You want to flood the main security area with cooking gas?" Ben asked. "Not just cooking gas, a mixture that will burn but not explode. Hot enough to force them out, but not hot enough to damage the station structure." Amy was already working on the technical details. "I can rig the ventilation system to pump the gas mixture into specific areas, but you'll need to time it perfectly. And we'll need a way to ignite it remotely," Ben added. Jake held up a small device he had built from kitchen equipment and electronic parts. "Already covered." As the hour approached, Jake made his final preparations. He put on his clean chef's uniform and walked toward the main security office, but not through the corridors where the aliens expected him. Instead, he used the service tunnels to position himself directly above the security office. Carlos and his combat team were positioned near the assembly hall, ready to take advantage of any confusion. Amy and Ben were at the environmental controls, waiting for Jake's signal. "This is it," Jake whispered into his radio. "If this works, we take back the station tonight. If it doesn't work, it'll work," Pete's voice came back over the radio. "You're the best cook I know, and apparently you're not bad at war either." Jake smiled. Then he pressed the button on his ignition device. The security office filled with superheated gas in seconds. Alarms started screaming. Zephyrian soldiers came running out of the building, coughing and gasping for air. In the confusion, Carlos's team moved in on the assembly hall guards. The aliens were distracted by the fire alarms and the emergency. They never saw the attack coming. Jake dropped through the ceiling into the evacuated security office and grabbed as many alien weapons as he could carry. Then he ran for the service tunnels as the building filled with smoke and flames. Some examples must be made, but the majority will survive to serve the Zephyrian Empire. Jake felt the weight of the choice. If he surrendered, thousands of people would live as slaves. If he continued to fight, many of them would die. But if he gave up now, humanity would never be free. "I need time to think," Jake said. General Zekathara smiled coldly. "You have 1 hour. Then I start executing prisoners until you surrender." As the alien soldiers marched Jake and his team to a holding area, Jake's mind was racing. He needed a miracle. He needed something that would turn the entire situation around in one move. Then he remembered Ben's plan to break the communications. Jamming. "Amy," he whispered as they were pushed into a cell. "Did Ben send that message to Earth?" "Yes, just before the power went out. But Jake, even if Earth received it, help would take days to arrive. We don't have days." Jake smiled for the first time since Pete's death. "We don't need Earth to come to us. We just need them to know we're here." "I don't understand." "General Zekathara thinks no one knows about this attack. That's why he's been so bold. But if he finds out that Earth knows what's happening, he'll have to change his plans." Jake began to shout at the guards in the Zephyrian language. He had learned some of their words during his weeks of cooking for the delegation. "Tell your general that Earth fleet is coming," he yelled. "Human warships will be here soon." It was a bluff, but Jake was betting that the general would believe it. After all, if Earth had received a distress signal, they would definitely send military ships to investigate. Within minutes, General Zekathara appeared at their cell. "What did you say about Earth ships?" he demanded. "Your communications jamming." "Wasn't perfect," Jake lied smoothly. "We got a message through before your attack tonight. Earth Command knows you're here. They know you've violated the peace treaty, and they're sending the entire Third Fleet to take back this station." The general's face showed worry for the first time since Jake had seen him. "You are lying." "Am I? How long do you think it takes for human warships to reach this sector? 3 days? 4 at most? How long have you been here, General? How long do you have before Earth's military arrives and finds you occupying one of their stations?" Jake could see the doubt in the alien's eyes. The general had been counting on secrecy. If Earth knew about the attack, the entire situation would change. This would no longer be a simple occupation. It would be an act of war between two species. "Even if what you say is true," the general said slowly, "Earth ships cannot match Zephyrian technology." "Maybe not ship to ship," Jake agreed. "But can your 300 soldiers fight off an entire human battle fleet? Can you win when you're trapped on this station with nowhere to run?" General Zekathara turned and walked away without another word. Jake knew he had planted a seed of doubt. Now he had to hope it would grow. Over the next few hours, Jake could hear increased activity throughout the station. Alien soldiers were moving equipment and setting up new defensive positions. The general was preparing for a siege. But Jake had one more card to play. Something he had been saving for the most desperate moment. And that moment had arrived. In his cell, Jake began to take apart the small ignition device he had built for the security office attack. Hidden inside it was a tiny transmitter that Ben had helped him construct. It was connected to every system on the station that Jake had sabotaged over the past week. All the power lines they had cut but not removed. All the gas lines they had rerouted. All the explosive devices they had hidden throughout the station. With one signal, Jake could activate them all at once. The explosion would destroy most of the station. It would kill the aliens, but it would also kill the human prisoners. It would be the ultimate sacrifice, ensuring that the Zephyrians gained nothing from their attack, even if it cost thousands of human lives. Jake stared at the transmitter in his hand. Everything he had fought for came down to this moment. Everything Pete had died for. Everything the Resistance had sacrificed. But he couldn't do it. He couldn't murder thousands of innocent people, even to deny victory to the enemy. Instead, Jake made a different choice. A choice that would either save everyone or doom them all. He activated the transmitter, but with a different signal. Not The one that would cause massive explosions, but the one that would overload every system on the station simultaneously. The lights went out. The air circulation stopped. The artificial gravity failed. Every electronic system on Deep Space Station Alpha 7 shut down at exactly the same moment. In the complete darkness and confusion that followed, Jake Miller prepared to make his final stand. When every system on the station failed at once, chaos erupted in the darkness. Zephyrian soldiers floated helplessly in zero gravity, confused and scared. Their advanced weapons were useless without power. Their communication systems were dead. For the first time since the attack began, the aliens were more lost than the humans. But Jake had spent 3 years learning every inch of Deep Space Station Alpha 7. He could move through it blindfolded. In the darkness, he was finally on equal ground with his enemies. He broke out of his cell using a piece of the transmitter as a lockpick. Amy and his other team members followed him as they floated through the corridors. Around them, they could hear alien voices calling out in panic. "Amy," Jake whispered, "how long until emergency power kicks in?" "Maybe 20 minutes if the backup systems work properly. But Jake, when the power comes back, we'll be in the same situation as before." Jake smiled in the darkness. "No, we won't. Because I'm betting General Zekathara is going to make a big mistake." Jake was right. When the emergency lights finally came on, they revealed that the aliens had changed their positions completely. Instead of guarding prisoners, they were now defending critical systems. They were protecting the power plant, the life support systems, and the communications center. "They're scared," Carlos observed. "They think we're going to destroy the station." "Good," Jake replied. "Let them be scared." The shift in alien tactics had created opportunities that Jake was quick to exploit. With most guards moved away from the prison areas, his teams were able to free thousands more prisoners. By dawn, more than half the station's population was hiding in the service tunnels and maintenance areas. But Jake knew that freeing prisoners wasn't enough. The aliens still controlled the key systems, and they were still calling for reinforcements. He needed to end this quickly. "Ben," Jake said to the engineer, "can you get the main communication system working?" "Probably, but the aliens control the communications center." "What if you didn't need the communications center? What if you could broadcast from somewhere else?" Ben thought about this. The emergency broadcast system in the kitchen. It's designed to reach the entire station in case of fire or other disasters. I could modify it to send signals into space. "Do it." While Ben worked on the communication system, Jake prepared for his final gamble. He was going to offer General Zekathara a trade that the alien commander couldn't refuse. Jake made his way to the communications center, moving carefully through the service tunnels. The area was heavily guarded, but Jake had something the guards didn't expect: a white flag made from his chef's hat. He emerged from a maintenance hatch directly in front of the main entrance, hands raised, holding the white flag. "I want to speak to General Zekathara," he called out. "I have a proposal." The alien guards were suspicious, but they let him approach. General Zekathara met him at the entrance to the communications center. The alien looked tired and worried. "Jake Miller, have you come to surrender?" "I've come to make a deal," Jake said. "You want to leave this station alive. I want my people to be safe. Maybe we can help each other." "What kind of deal?" Jake took a deep breath. This was the most important conversation of his life. "Your reinforcements?" "Aren't coming, are they?" Jake said. "You lied to your soldiers to keep them fighting, but the truth is, your government doesn't want a war with Earth over one space station." The general's expression confirmed Jake's guess. "What do you want?" "Safe passage for you and your soldiers. Take your ships and leave. In return, you release all the prisoners and promise never to attack human colonies again." "And if I refuse?" Jake gestured toward the station around them. "Then we all die here together. Because I will destroy this station before I let you use it as a base to attack my people." General Zekathara studied Jake's face carefully. "You would really kill thousands of your own people to stop us?" "I hope I don't have to find out." The general was quiet for a long moment. Jake could see him weighing his options. Stay and fight a war he couldn't win, or leave and live to fight another day. "I need guarantees," the general said finally. "How do I know you won't attack my ships as we leave?" "Because I'm not a murderer," Jake replied. "I just want my home back." But before the general could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the station. Both men looked up in surprise. "What's happening?" General Zekthara demanded. The answer came over the emergency communication system in Ben's voice. "Attention all station personnel. This is Ben Parker in engineering. Long range. Sensors have detected multiple human warships approaching the station. Estimated time of arrival, 6 hours." Jake tried to keep his face neutral, but inside he was cheering. Ben had found a way to fake sensor readings and make them appear on the alien monitoring systems. The Zephyrians would think Earth reinforcements were really coming. General Zekthara's face went pale. "Impossible. Our intelligence said the nearest Earth fleet was weeks away." "Maybe your intelligence was wrong," Jake said calmly. "Or maybe Earth has faster ships than you thought." The general grabbed a communication device and barked orders in the Zephyrian language. Jake didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. The aliens were panicking. 6 hours, the general muttered. "Not enough time to evacuate properly." "Then you'd better start now," Jake suggested. What happened next was almost too easy. Faced with the prospect of fighting an entire human battle fleet while trapped on a space station, General Zekthara ordered his forces to begin immediate evacuation. The aliens released their remaining prisoners and began moving their equipment to their ships. Jake watched from the communications center as thousands of human prisoners emerged from the conference rooms and assembly halls. They looked tired and scared, but they were alive. Children ran to their parents. Friends embraced. Families were reunited. But Jake's victory was interrupted by a young voice calling his name. "Jake! Jake!" He turned to see a small boy running toward him. It was Bobby Chen, a 10-year-old whose parents worked in the science labs. Jake had been protecting the boy since the attack began, making sure he had food and staying safe in the service tunnels. "Bobby, are you okay? Where are your parents?" "They're safe," Bobby said, breathing hard from running. "But Jake, I heard what the aliens said. There aren't really any Earth ships coming, are there?" Jake looked down at the boy. Bobby was smart, for his age. Too smart to fool with lies. "No," Jake said quietly. "There aren't any ships coming. It was a trick." Then what happens when the aliens figure that out? Jake had been wondering the same thing. General Zekthara wasn't stupid. Eventually, he would realize that no Earth ships were going to appear. Then he might change his mind about leaving. "I don't know, Bobby. But whatever happens, I'll make sure you're safe." Bobby looked up at Jake with serious eyes. "My dad says cooks feed people. They don't let people go hungry. You've been feeding all of us, haven't you? Not just with food, but with hope." Jake felt tears in his eyes. "I've been trying, kid." "Then keep trying. Don't give up." Jake knelt down and hugged the boy. "I won't give up, I promise." Over the next few hours, Jake watched as the Zephyrian soldiers loaded their equipment onto their ships. The evacuation was proceeding smoothly, but Jake could see that General Zekthara was getting suspicious. The alien commander kept checking his sensors, looking for the human fleet that never appeared. Finally, with just 1 hour left until the supposed arrival of Earth reinforcements, the general confronted Jake again. "There are no human ships coming," he said flatly. "You tricked me." Jake met his gaze steadily. "Does it matter? You're almost finished evacuating. Your soldiers are safe. Your equipment is loaded. You can leave any time you want. But now I know you lied, which means our deal is void." "What deal?" "You're holding a space station with 15,000 civilians. Even if you kill all of us, what do you gain? Earth will find out eventually. They'll send real warships. Your government will have a war they don't want." General Zekthara drew his weapon. "Maybe, but you won't live to see it." Jake didn't flinch. "Go ahead. Shoot me. But my people will keep fighting, and every human who dies here will be one more reason for Earth to destroy your homeworld." For a long moment, the two leaders stared at each other. Then, slowly, General Zekthara lowered his weapon. "You are a dangerous enemy, Jake Miller. I hope we never meet again." "We won't," Jake replied, "because you're leaving, and you're never coming back." General Zekthara turned and walked toward his ship. Jake watched as the last Zephyrian soldiers boarded their vessels. The docking bay doors opened, and one by one, the alien ships departed Deep Space Station Alpha 7. Jake stood in the observation deck and watched the ships disappear into space. Around him, thousands of station residents were celebrating. They were free. They were alive. They were home. Carlos appeared beside him. "You did it, Jake. You actually did it." "We did it," Jake corrected. "All of us together." Amy joined them, looking exhausted but happy. "So what happens now? Do we go back to normal life?" Jake thought about that. Could he go back to being just a cook after everything that had happened? Could any of them go back to their old lives? "I think normal life is going to be different from now on," he said. Dr. Young approached the group. "Jake, there's something you should know. I've been monitoring communications with Earth. They did receive Ben's distress signal. Real help is on the way." "How long?" Jake asked. 3 days. Jake nodded. When Earth's ships arrived, they would find Deep Space Station Alpha 7 still in human hands. They would find 15,000 survivors who had fought against impossible odds and won. They would find proof that humans don't give up, even when facing superior technology and overwhelming force. But most importantly, they would find that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones nobody expects. 6 months later, Jake Miller stood in a new kitchen on the rebuilt Deep Space Station Alpha 7. The walls were covered with pictures of the people who had died during the attack. Pete Santos smiled down from the largest frame, wearing his chef's hat and holding a wooden spoon. Jake had been offered promotions, medals, and command positions. Politicians from Earth wanted to make him a symbol of human courage. Military leaders wanted to study his tactics. But Jake had turned them all down. He was still the head chef. He still got up at 5 in the morning. He still made sure that 15,000 people had good food to eat every day. The only difference was that now everyone knew his story. They knew that Jake Miller had been just a cook when the aliens attacked. But when his people needed him most, he had become something more. Bobby Chen, now 11 years old, often helped in the kitchen after school. His favorite job was helping Jake prepare the memorial dinner they held every month for Pete and the other fallen defenders. "Jake," Bobby said one evening as they worked together, "do you ever wish things had been different? That you could have saved everyone?" Jake looked at the boy who had become like a son to him. "Every day, Bobby. But I've learned something important. We can't save everyone, but we can try to save someone. And if we all try to save someone, maybe that's enough." "Is that why you're still a cook? Even though you could be anything now?" Jake smiled and handed Bobby a wooden spoon. "I'm still a cook because that's who I am. That's who I was when this all started, and that's who I want to be when it ends. Besides, someone has to make sure our people are fed." Bobby nodded seriously. "Cooks feed people. They don't let people go hungry." "That's right," Jake said. "And as long as I'm here, nobody on this station will ever go hungry." Outside the kitchen windows, stars shone in the darkness of space. Somewhere among those stars were other threats, other enemies who might someday come to test humanity's resolve. But Jake Miller wasn't worried about tomorrow's battles. Tonight, he had 15,000 people to feed. And that was enough. Because Jake Miller was just a cook. But when it mattered most, that was exactly what humanity needed.